They pressed Elsin Brack's palm to the pack scale because an oath-bound servant was easier to weigh than a crown. No one asked why the kingdom's hunger needed her hand if the storehouses had truly gone empty. Empty storehouses did not require scapegoats. Weighted ledgers did. And weighted ledgers always needed a hand lower than the one that wrote them. The ancient scale stood in the center of the Moon Treasury Hall, taller than a gallows and colder than winter stone. Its 2 silver plates hung from chains carved with wolf teeth, grain stalks, medicine leaves, and old moon silver coins. One plate was meant for the accused, the other was meant for the debt. But in Caerwyn, debt learned to stand on the poorer side first. That was why Elsin's palm had been chosen before the crown. In Caerwyn, justice was supposed to be simple. If a servant stole from the packs, guilt would drag her side down. Elsin's side stayed empty. That was the first thing the court hated. Not her silence. Not her bound wrists. The emptiness. A guilty servant was supposed to make the scale move. A useful lie always preferred motion. Stillness was dangerous because it made the court listen. And listening was the first thing a clean theft feared. Elsin stood barefoot beneath the silver chains with her right palm forced flat against the cold weighing stone. A gray oath cord looped from her wrist to the base of the scale, thin enough to look merciful, tight enough to remind everyone that her body did not fully belong to itself. She wore a plain brown servant dress patched at both elbows. Her dark hair had been pinned badly by a guard, who had not cared whether the pins scraped her scalp. On her left sleeve, the mark of the lower granary still showed in faded thread. That mark had once meant service. Tonight, the court made it mean theft. High Treasurer Corvin Hale stood beside the scale with a ledger bound in white wolf hide. He was narrow, elegant, and dry-eyed, the kind of man who could speak of starving packs without ever looking at a bowl. Rings of moon silver covered his fingers. Each ring was worth more than the medicine Elsin had been accused of stealing. He opened the ledger slowly. "Elsin Brack," he said, "oath-bound servant of the lower granary, stands accused of removing grain, feverroot medicine, and moon silver allotments from royal supply lines meant for the lower packs." A sound moved through the hall. Anger from nobles who wanted theft, punished. Hunger from lower pack envoys who had come to see someone answer. Fear from servants who understood that one condemned body could feed a court's need for order better than grain ever fed a village. Elsin kept her palm on the stone. She had carried sacks until her shoulders bled. She had counted feverroot leaves by candlelight, while children coughed outside the storehouse doors. She had watched carts leave the royal yard sealed for the lower packs, then arrive half empty with noble wax still warm on the ropes. Wax could lie cleaner than mouths, especially when the wax belonged to people no guard searched. She had not stolen from the hungry. She had hidden 3 broken tablets from the counting room because the numbers on them did not match the royal ledger. Theft had not begun in her hands. It had begun where numbers were taught to kneel, and numbers knelt most easily inside royal ledgers. That was her crime. Corvin lifted one hand. By pack law, the accused will be weighed against what she took. Grain debt, medicine debt, moon silver debt. If the scale finds guilt, the servant's oath is forfeit before the Alpha King. At the far end of the hall, Alpha King Rhaelor Caerwyn sat beneath a black canopy stitched with silver wolves. He did not wear his crown. It rested on a velvet stand beside the throne, a dark silver circlet shaped like interlocking wolf jaws. Even without it, the room bent toward him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and still as a drawn blade, with black hair swept back from a severe face and pale gold eyes that made every whisper feel heard. His armor was matte black, edged in moon silver, beautiful enough to hide how cold it was. Behind him, his wolf shadow stretched across the wall. It should have been immense. Instead, it looked thin along the ribs, not weak, unfed. Elsin noticed because servants noticed what rulers hid badly. Rhaelor's gaze rested on her palm. "You served the lower granary for 6 years." "Yes, Majesty." "Then you knew what those stores meant." "I knew better than most." Corvin's mouth tightened. "The accused speaks as if knowledge softens theft." Elsin turned her head toward him. "Knowledge makes theft harder to hide." The hall sharpened. Rhaelor's eyes narrowed slightly. Corvin closed the ledger with a soft snap. "Place the charge." 2 clerks brought 3 tokens to the debt plate. a black grain kernel, a dried feverroot leaf, and a small moon silver coin. Each token carried enough law to bury a servant. Corvin set them down one by one. The accused plate beneath Elsin's palm did not move. Her side remained high, cold, and empty. Corvin frowned. One clerk glanced at the chain. The lower pack envoys leaned forward. Again, Corvin said. The clerks added more tokens. Another grain kernel, another leaf, 3 more moon silver coins. The debt plate should have dipped. Elsin's guilt should have answered. That was how the pack scale had judged servants for generations. Nothing happened. The hall grew too quiet. Rhaelor stood. The movement carried through the room like a storm crossing ice. Corvin recovered quickly. A refusal reading. Some oath-bound servants learned to lock guilt in the blood. Elsin looked at him. Or the debt is not mine. The words left her mouth before fear could stop them. Corvin's face went blank. Careful. Rhaelor descended 1 step from the throne platform. His wolf shadow moved behind him, ribs tightening against the wall. What did you say? Elsin's palm burned cold against the scale. I said the debt is not mine. Corvin lifted the white wolf-hide ledger. Majesty, servant defiance during weighing is common when guilt resists exposure. Then expose it, Rhaelor said. Corvin turned toward the crown on its velvet stand. For the first time that night, his hand hesitated, only for a breath. But Elsin saw it. So did the king. Corvin bowed. The pack scale may weigh servant guilt without royal regalia. Rhaelor's voice lowered. Use the crown. The room changed. Clerks froze. Nobles looked at one another. Lower pack envoys stopped breathing. No one placed the Alpha King's crown on a debt scale unless the law demanded crown witness. And no one demanded crown witness for a servant unless something in the first weighing had gone wrong. Corvin lifted the dark silver circlet with both hands and set it on the opposite plate. The pack scale woke. Black moonlight spilled from beneath the crown. The debt plate dropped so violently the chains screamed. Elsin's side stayed empty. The crown sank lower and lower, as if dragged by a debt too deep to see. Across the silver beam, old runes burned awake. Servant guilt absent. Lower pack debt hidden. Royal ledger waited. Crown obligation unpaid. The scale had named the debtor. It had not yet named the hand that weighted the ledger. The pack scale had not weighed Elsin as thief. It had weighed the Alpha King's crown as debtor. But debt did not move by crown alone. Someone had taught the ledger where to send hunger. The pack scale had weighed the crown as debtor, but not the hand that weighted the ledger. Elsin's palm still lay flat against the weighing stone, cold burning through her skin as if the scale had teeth under the silver surface. The oath cord around her wrist pulled tight each time she breathed. It had not loosened when her side of the scale stayed empty. It had not snapped when the crown sank. Truth had entered the Moon Treasury Hall, and Elsin was still bound beneath it. The pack scale did not protect her. It weighed. That was all. The Alpha King's crown remained on the debt plate, dragged low into black moonlight. The silver chains groaned above it, trembling under a burden no one could see. Across from it, Elsin's accused plate stayed lifted and empty, her palm the only living contact holding the record open. High Treasurer Corvin Hale closed one hand over the white wolf-hide ledger against his chest. His moon-silver rings flashed coldly, each one catching the same black light that bled beneath the crown. Crown, weighing distortion, he said. The words came smoothly. Too smoothly. Several nobles seized them with their eyes before their mouths dared repeat them. Corvin turned toward the court. The pack scale was never meant to weigh royal obligation through a granary servant's palm. Grain hands carry grain memory. Feverroot hands carry medicine loss. Crown obligations cannot be tried through a granary servant's palm. Elsin looked at him. My palm was clean enough when you wanted it to carry guilt. A lower pack envoy made a sound that was almost a breath, almost a prayer. Corvin's gaze cut toward him, and the man went still. Rhaelor stood halfway down from the throne platform, no longer seated above the weighing, not yet close enough to share it. His wolf shadow stretched behind him along the wall, ribs thin beneath its dark shape. The beast stared at the crown as if it had smelled rot inside silver. Rhaelor's voice was low. If her hand cannot weigh crown obligation, why did the scale answer when my crown touched it? Corvin bowed. Because royal regalia can overwhelm lesser contact. A servant's palm may draw disorder from the crown and mistake it for debt. Elsin pressed her palm harder to the stone, though pain ran through her wrist. Then let it read the disorder. Corvin's mouth tightened. She lifted her chin toward the silver beam. Read who weighted the royal ledger. The hall chilled. Corvin took one step forward. The accused does not command the pack scale. No, Elsin said. You pressed my hand here. The scale answered before Corvin could speak again. A deep metallic hum moved through the chains. It was not a bell. It was not a howl. It was the sound of measured things remembering where they had been moved. Black moonlight spread from beneath the crown across the floor in thin lines, each one branching like a road from the royal storehouses to the lower pack villages. 4 lines burned across the silver beam. Treasurer ledger entered. Supply carts diverted. Feverroot count reduced. Lower pack hunger assigned. The Moon Treasury Hall went quiet enough for Elsin to hear the oath cord scrape against her wrist. Rhaelor read the first line. Treasurer ledger entered. Corvin did not flinch. Treasury ledgers enter every supply line by law. Elsin said, Not every ledger sends carts away from hungry villages. Corvin turned on her. A servant who has handled sacks and counting tablets may confuse root adjustment with theft. You called it theft before the scale read, because your hidden tablets prove concealment. They proved the numbers changed after the carts left. The lower pack envoys leaned forward now, hunger sharpening into something more dangerous than need. Rhaelor looked at the black moonlight route stretching across the floor. Some lines glowed bright at the royal storehouses, then thinned before reaching the lower villages. Others bent toward noble estates marked by small silver sigils. He saw them. Elsin watched him see them. His face changed. Not enough to make him innocent. Enough to make the lie heavier. Storehouses were not empty, he said. Corvin bowed again, but his hands tightened on the ledger. Redistribution during shortage is royal survival. Elsin's voice stayed steady. Survival for whom? No one answered. The scale gave another low hum. The crown sank a fraction deeper, and Rhaelor's wolf shadow pressed one paw against the wall as if the weight had touched bone. Rhaelor looked at Elsin's hand, still held to the stone by oath cord and law. I let the scale take her palm because weighing a servant was easier than weighing my crown. The admission did not free her. It did not make the cord loosen. It only made the court look at the weighing differently. Elsin met his eyes. You wanted my hand to carry the missing grain. It carried the root. And roots, once named, could point past the servant they were meant to bury. Corvin snapped the white wolf-hide ledger shut. The pack scale screamed through Elsin's palm. The black moonlight flickered. The silver roots on the floor began to fold back into darkness. Village lines vanished first. Noble estate lines lasted longer. Corvin pressed one moon-silver ring into the ledger clasp, and the white wolf-hide cover began to drink the black routes back into its pages. Elsin felt the scale pulling through her palm, through every sack she had carried, every feverroot count she had checked, every broken tablet she had hidden under a loose stone in the counting room. If Rhaelor seized him now, nobles would call it royal guilt, protecting itself from audit. If Elsin pulled her hand away, Corvin would call the route reading broken. If the ledger closed, the lower packs would remain hungry, and her palm would remain the place where hunger had been taught to kneel. Rhaelor stopped with one hand lifted, furious enough to break the ledger and late enough to understand why he could not. Elsin pressed her palm harder into the stone until the oath cord cut her wrist. Read before he folds the hunger back into numbers. The pack scale burned cold through her blood. Palm contact broken. Route record closes. Servant theft restored. Elsin did not pull away. The silver chains shrieked once more, and black moonlight snapped back across the floor, catching the vanishing lines before Corvin's ledger could swallow them whole. A final record burned across the silver beam. Ledger route retained. Granary palm active. Noble wax detected. Lower pack hunger assigned. The lower packs had not starved, because Elsin stole from the storehouses. Corvin's royal ledger had weighted the supply lines, diverting grain and feverroot before the carts reached the villages, then leaving Elsin's oath-bound palm to carry the hunger. The pack scale had named the weighted ledger, but not where the stolen hunger was fed. A root could show where hunger went. It could not yet show who taught death to wear another name. Elsin's palm remained pressed to the weighing stone, and the cold had gone past skin into bone. The oath cord had cut a red line around her wrist, where she had forced her hand harder against the scale. Blood did not run far. It only darkened the gray cord, as if even her pain had to stay tied to royal procedure. The pack scale did not loosen it. The pack scale did not lift her. It kept weighing, and weighing still needed the hand the court had chosen to hurt. Across the floor, the black moonlight roots flickered like roads seen beneath dark water. The village lines had almost vanished when Corvin's ledger tried to drink them back, but the noble estate lines still glowed faintly, thin silver marks bending away from the lower pack villages, and toward the western heights, where the great houses kept winter cellars under stone. High Treasurer Corvin held the white wolf-hide ledger tight against his chest, one moon-silver ring still pressed into the clasp. His face had recovered its careful calm, but the rings on his hand had gone still. "Destination readings are notoriously unstable," he said. Elsin almost smiled. "Another name for proof." Corvin faced the court. "A granary servant's palm may remember carts, sacks, feverroot counts, and broken supply tablets. But route destination records cannot be tried through a granary servant's palm. She touched too much of the lower supply chain. Her contact can pull need into accusation," a noblewoman whispered. "Can it?" Corvin answered without looking at her. "Hunger makes poor witnesses theatrical." Corvin had always preferred hunger as a number. The lower pack envoys stiffened. Elsin looked at the noble estate lines on the floor. "Then let the scale read where the carts went." Corvin turned sharply. "The accused will not direct the weighing." "No," Elsin said. "I will keep my hand where you put it." The scale hummed. Rhaelor stood close enough now that the black moonlight touched the edge of his boots. He had not taken Elsin's wrist from the cord. He had not seized Corvin. His restraint cut the hall in a different way now. Not clean, not gentle, but aware. If he broke the ledger before the destination read, Corvin would claim royal fear had interrupted a false record. If he freed her before the scale finished, the court would say mercy had outweighed evidence. Elsin kept her palm on the stone because the kingdom had made her hand the contact. Rhaelor looked at the glowing estate lines. "Read where the carts went." Corvin's eyes flashed. "Majesty." The pack scale answered before the title could become a shield. The silver chains tightened. The crown on the debt plate sank another inch into black moonlight, and the roots across the floor sharpened until they looked like veins feeding something hidden beneath the noble quarter. 4 lines burned along the silver beam. Noble wax entered. Estate gates opened. Feverroot stores sealed. Lower pack deaths concealed. The scale had named the gates. It had not yet named the hand that wrote the deaths as shortage. The hall did not gasp this time. It recoiled. That was worse. A gasp belonged to surprise. Recoil belonged to recognition. Elsin saw the lower pack envoys read the 3rd line. Feverroot stores sealed. One of them pressed a hand to his mouth. Another bowed his head as if he had suddenly remembered every fever house that had waited for medicine and received only excuses. Corvin spoke quickly. Estate storage was temporary. During famine, noble houses are required to secure emergency reserves. Elsin looked at him. Emergency for whom? For the stability of the realm. For the lower pack sick? His mouth flattened. Sentiment does not balance supply. No, Elsin said. Your ledger did. The black moonlight flared beneath the crown. The floor opened into a weighing vision. Not a spirit. Not a prophecy. A record. Royal carts rolled through night rain with noble wax still warm on their ropes. At the fork where the lower village road bent east, Corvin's seal glowed on the ledger page. The carts turned west instead. Gates opened at 3 noble estates. Grain disappeared into deep storehouses. Feverroot crates were carried into cellars lined with moon-silver locks. Outside the lower villages, pack healers scraped dry jars and wrote shortage in shaking hands. Rhaelor's face went still. Elsin knew he had seen famine before, but not like this. Kings saw hunger after it became reports, pleas, and memorial smoke. They rarely saw the road where hunger was sent before it arrived. He read the glowing estate names under his breath, and each one struck like a blade against his crown. Then he looked at the debt plate. If my crown's debt fed noble gates, he said, voice low and cold, then my mercy has been rationed by ledgers I never weighed. Corvin bowed again. Majesty, your mercy was preserved by controlled distribution, Without noble reserves, the upper packs would have fractured. The lower packs suffered because the winter was cruel. Elsin turned her head toward Rhaelor. You counted hunger after it reached us. He counted it before it left you. And then he counted the dead as winter. The words settled between them. Not forgiveness. Not accusation alone. A measure. Rhaelor's wolf shadow pressed against the wall, thin ribs shuddering as if the scale's weight had moved through it. The crown sank another fraction lower. Corvin snapped the ledger open again, faster this time. Pages whipped under his ringed thumb. Destination record complete. The accused has exceeded lawful contact. Black moonlight began to break at the estate gates. Elsin felt it through her palm, the record trying to fold, not because it was finished, but because Corvin knew the next layer would not be hunger in general. It would be names, houses, locks, death tablets written as shortage. She pushed harder into the scale. The oath cord cut deeper. Read before he seals the sellers back into silence. The pack scale screamed through the chains. Palm contact strained. Destination route active. Noble wax retained. Death count buried. The next debt was not grain. It was names. Corvin's ledger tried to close, but the silver beam held one final image in the air. Feverroot crates stacked behind estate gates, while lower pack death tablets were filed under winter shortage. The stolen grain had not vanished into famine. It had passed through noble gates under warm wax, while feverroot meant for the lower pack sick sat sealed in estate cellars, and lower pack deaths were written as shortage. The pack scale had named the noble gates, but not who wrote the lower pack dead as winter shortage. The death tablets waited beneath the ledger like buried teeth. Elsin could feel them through the stone. Not as voices, not as ghosts, as weight. Each name pressed upward through the weighing plate, caught somewhere between record and erasure. Her palm burned cold against the pack scale, and the oath cord around her wrist had cut deep enough that the gray thread was no longer gray. The scale did not loosen it. The scale did not pity her. The scale only kept using the contact the court had forced into place. Across the floor, the noble estate lines still glowed faintly, leading from royal supply roads to sealed cellar gates. The lower village lines flickered weaker now, thin as hunger itself. Beside the scale, Corvin Hale held his white wolfhide ledger open with one ringed hand, his face calm again because calm was the last luxury of men who had hidden famine inside ink. He turned toward the court. Destination records are complete. The accused has already exceeded lawful contact. Elsin looked up slowly. The dead are not complete. A lower pack envoy flinched. Corvin did not. Death tablets cannot be tried through a granary servant's palm. There it was. Not denial. Doctrine. He gave the court a rule so it would not have to look at names. Corvin continued. A granary hand remembers sacks, feverroot bundles, cart ropes, and village posts. It does not weigh winter mortality. Death during famine belongs to weather, illness, and pack weakness, not theft. Rhaelor's wolf shadow pressed against the wall behind him, ribs sharp beneath the dark shape. The Alpha King's crown still hung low on the debt plate, black moonlight pooling beneath it. He had not taken Elsin's hand from the stone. He had not broken Corvin's ledger. He stood close enough now to see her blood on the oath cord, and late enough to understand that seeing did not make him clean. Elsin whispered, "Read who wrote the deaths as shortage." Corvin snapped the ledger half-closed. No. The pack scale answered anyway. The silver chains tightened until the entire Moon Treasury Hall seemed to hold its breath. Black moonlight rose from the floor and gathered beneath the white wolfhide ledger. Pages fluttered against Corvin's hand, not opening fully, only showing edges. Black marks, village seals, winter notations, death counts trimmed into columns. 4 lines burned across the silver beam. Death tablets entered. Winter shortage applied. Relief order delayed. Treasurer seal retained. The hall went still. Elsin felt the words move through her palm like ice under skin. Relief order delayed. Not late by storm. Not lost by road. Delayed. Rhaelor read the line once without sound, then again aloud. Relief order delayed. Corvin bowed his head. During winter, relief must be timed with caution. If medicine and grain are released too quickly, panic drains the stores. Elsin stared at him. The stores were already behind noble gates. Secured, Corvin said. Locked. Preserved. For whom? His eyes hardened. For the realm. She looked at the lower pack envoys. The realm had fever houses too. One envoy pressed his fist against his chest, but he did not speak. No one wanted to become the next body a ledger could rename. Rhaelor stepped closer to the silver beam. When was my relief order sent? Corvin lifted the ledger. Under royal seal, after death reports confirmed winter severity. Elsin's voice cut through the quiet. After he named them winter, Corvin turned. You presume too much. You counted the fever after the bowls were empty, she said. He counted it when the medicine doors were locked. The pack scale gave a low metallic groan. The floor opened into another weighing vision. Not a battlefield. Not a riot. A record room. Stone shelves. Death tablets stacked in rows. Thin wooden slates marked with names from lower pack houses. A clerk with ink-black fingers carrying one tablet to Corvin's desk. Corvin's seal pressing into wax. The cause line changed from medicine withheld to winter shortage. A second tablet, then a third, then a whole tray of names bent under the same phrase. Winter shortage. Winter shortage. Winter shortage. Rhaelor's face went colder with each slate. If my relief came after their deaths were renamed, he said, then my mercy arrived to a ledger already buried. His words did not free Elsin. They did not bring the dead back into their bodies. They only named the shape of failure standing beside the crown. Corvin shut the ledger harder. The weighing vision shivered. Deaths during winter are not theft, he said. They are weather. Elsin pressed her bleeding palm flatter to the stone. Weather does not wear your seal. The pack scale screamed through the chains. Palm contact strained. Death root active. Shortage label unstable. Relief delay retained. Corvin's ring dug into the ledger clasp. The white wolf hide began drinking the death tablets back into its pages, one name at a time. Elsin almost pulled away. Pain made the thought bright. Then she saw the lower village lines fading first. Again, she forced her hand down until the oath cord cut deeper. Read before he turns the dead back into winter. The scale held one final image in black moonlight. Death tablets rewritten after Corvin delayed relief orders. Feverroot sealed behind noble cellar doors. And the crown's mercy arriving only after the names had already been buried. The lower pack dead had not been lost to winter alone. Their death tablets had been rewritten as shortage after Corvin delayed relief orders, sealing Feverroot behind noble cellar doors while the crown's mercy arrived only after the names were already buried. The first death tablet did not rise like a ghost. It sank beneath the crown. Black moonlight gathered around the name carved into the small wooden slate, pulling the Alpha King's circlet lower until the silver chains trembled. Elsin felt the weight through her palm. Not sorrow, not memory alone. Debt. The pack scale did not mourn the dead. It weighed what had been taken from them before they became dead enough for Corvin's ledger to rename. Her wrist throbbed beneath the oath cord. The cut had widened. Still, no one loosened it. A record could reveal murder and still leave the witness bound if law had been trained to prefer procedure over relief. Corvin Hale stared at the death tablet for one breath too long, then turned the page in his white wolf-hide ledger as if the movement could bury the image. The scale has exceeded its lawful debt range. Elsin's voice came thin but steady. It has not weighed the moon silver yet. The hall shifted. Grain had hunger behind it. Feverroot had death. Moon silver had power. That was why the nobles finally became afraid. Corvin's rings flashed under the black light. He closed his fingers slowly. Moon, silver allotments are treasury instruments. They cannot be tried through a granary servant's palm. Elsin looked at his hand. My palm was good enough when you accused it of taking them. A lower pack envoy lifted his head. Rhaelor saw the rings, too. His wolf shadow pressed closer to the wall, ribs still sharp, eyes fixed on Corvin's moon-silver-covered fingers, as if the beast had smelled marrow inside polished metal. Rhaelor's voice lowered. Were moon-silver allotments included in the charge? Corvin bowed. Yes, Majesty. The accused was charged with grain, feverroot, and moon-silver disappearance. Then let the scale weigh them. Corvin's gaze flicked toward the crown. Majesty. Royal coinage cannot be entered into a servant contract without treasury review. Elsin almost laughed, but pain held the sound behind her teeth. I was almost forfeited without review. The pack scale hummed. A thin line of black moonlight moved from the crown, across the silver beam, down the chain and toward Corvin's rings. He stepped back. The light followed. Elsin pressed her palm harder to the stone. Read where the moon silver went. The scale answered, not with a scream this time, with a heavy ringing note, like coin dropped into a grave. 4 lines burned along the silver beam. Moon silver allotment entered. Lower pack debt unpaid. Noble ring minted. Servant theft charged. Every eye in the hall moved to Corvin's hand. His rings did not glow. They darkened. Black moonlight seeped into the moon silver bands, revealing faint inner markings no jeweler would have carved for beauty. Grain marks, feverroot tally scratches, lower pack debt seals. Elsin recognized the pattern from broken tablets she had hidden under stone. The moon silver had not vanished. It had been remade into proof of office, wealth, and silence. Corvin held his hand perfectly still. Treasury metals are commonly recast. Elsin said, not when fever houses are told the debt is unpaid. Moon. Silver cannot cure fever. No, she said, but it buys the road, the healer, the locked cellar key, the guard who lets the cart pass. The scale groaned. Rhaelor's crown sank another inch. Rhaelor stared at Corvin's rings as if seeing them for the first time. You wore allotments meant to clear lower pack debt. Corvin's face hardened. I wore treasury authority. The realm requires visible order. Elsin's palm burned so cold her fingers began to tremble. Visible order. Empty bowls. Locked medicine. Dead named winter. Rings named authority. The lower pack envoys did not rise. They did not shout. Their silence became worse than rebellion because it listened. Rhaelor looked at the crown, then at Elsin's bleeding wrist. If my seal sent moon silver and your ledger recast it before it paid the debt, then my crown was made to purchase silence. Corvin bowed deeply. Your crown purchased stability. No, Elsin said. His crown purchased your hands. The words struck the hall with the sound the scale had been holding back. Corvin snapped the ledger open again, pages whipping fast enough to stir the candle flames. The accused has exceeded all lawful contact. Grain root, fever root destination, death tablets, coinage, no servant palm can bear this much record without corruption. The pack scale flashed. Palm contact strained. Coin route active. Treasury metal altered. Servant charge preserved. Elsin nearly collapsed against the stone. Rhaelor stepped forward, one hand rising. She turned her head sharply. No. He stopped. The fury in him was visible now, sharp enough to make the nearest nobles step back. But fury was still not enough. If he tore the ledger away before the coin record finished, Corvin would call the moon silver reading corrupted by royal shame. Elsin knew because every trap in the hall still used her hand. Read before he melts the coin back into authority, she whispered. The pack scale answered with one final image. Royal moon silver coins poured from lower pack allotment boxes into a treasury mold, Corvin's seal pressed into the soft metal, rings cooled in black water. The same rings later signed famine orders, closed medicine cellars, and stamped Elsin's charge. The missing moon silver had not been stolen by Elsin. It had been recast into Corvin's authority, worn on the hand that signed hunger into law, then used to mark her palm as the thief. The moon silver record had named Corvin's rings, but not the orders those rings had signed. The image of molten silver still hovered beneath the pack scale. Lower pack allotment coins poured into a treasury mold, Corvin's seal pressed into soft metal, rings cooled in black water, and the same rings later touching famine orders with clean authority. Elsin's palm remained on the weighing stone, fingers trembling now from cold and strain. The oath cord around her wrist had become a red-gray line of pain. No one removed it. No one could pretend not to see it. That was the cruelty of the scale. It did not hide the witness's suffering. It simply did not stop using it. Corvin closed his ringed hand into a fist. The darkened moon-silver bands no longer looked like ornaments. They looked like little closed mouths. Treasury metals do not speak for orders, he said. Coinage may be recast, authority may be worn, but signed relief commands, noble reserves, and servant oaths cannot be weighed through a granary palm. Elsin breathed slowly through her teeth. You keep naming what my hand cannot weigh after you made it carry all of it. A low murmur moved through the lower pack envoys. Rhaelor stood beside the debt plate now, near enough that the black moonlight from his sinking crown painted the edge of his armor. His wolf shadow remained thin along the wall, ribs showing like a famine record no treasurer could close. He looked at Corvin's rings. Those bands signed famine orders. Corvin bowed. They signed lawful distribution. Elsin lifted her eyes to the scale. Read what his rings signed. The white wolf-hide ledger snapped half shut in Corvin's hand. No, the pack scale answered. The silver chains tightened. Black moonlight threaded from Corvin's rings to the floor, then spread into thin writing lines that curled around the oath cord on Elsin's wrist. She flinched as the cord pulled tighter, not by a guard's hand, but by debt remembering where it had been tied. 4 lines burned across the beam. Relief gate sealed. Noble reserve, protected. Servant oath marked. Lower debt transferred. The hall seemed to lose its warmth all at once. Elsin stared at the 3rd line. Servant oath marked. She had known the cord-bound service. She had known it meant she could not leave the granary, refuse inventory, or speak against a royal count without permission. She had not known it could be marked like a ledger line. She had not known her oath could be made to hold a debt that never belonged to her. Rhaelor's face tightened. Lower debt transferred. Corvin said, Oath-bound servants are responsible for losses under their care. That is the foundation of supply discipline. Elsin looked at him. Losses under our care, or losses your ring sent away before we touched them? He did not answer her. He addressed the king instead. Majesty, if servant oaths cannot hold supply failure, then every granary collapses into accusation against the crown. Rhaelor's voice came low. It was already accusation against the crown. The scale showed me that when my crown sank. Corvin's calm thinned. The crown cannot personally count every sack. No, Elsin said. So you counted us instead. The pack scale groaned. The floor opened into another weighing vision. Rows of oath-bound servants stood in the lower granary at dawn, each with a gray cord around one wrist. A clerk dipped Corvin's ring into black moon ink and pressed the mark against a ledger page. At the same moment, the cords tightened. On the page, missing grain, missing feverroot, and unpaid moon silver shifted from royal obligation into servant liability. Elsin saw herself there, younger, thinner, carrying sacks with both shoulders bruised. She saw her name beside amounts no human body could ever have stolen. Her breath caught, but she did not pull away. The scale wrote again. Oath cord entered. Servant hand assigned. Royal shortage lowered. Granary gilt raised. Rhaelor looked at Elsin's wrist, and something in his expression broke without becoming soft. If my relief was signed shut by his rings, he said, and my shortage was lowered onto servant oaths, then my throne did not fail by ignorance alone. The word struck the hall harder than rage. Corvin's gaze sharpened. Majesty. Careful. Rhaelor looked at him. I am done being careful for your ledgers. Elsin turned her face toward the king. Careful is what made my hand useful. He took that blow without defending himself. Good. She needed him to feel it. Corvin stepped toward the scale and reached for the gray oath cord binding Elsin's wrist. If the oath is corrupted, the contact must be released. Elsin understood too quickly. If Corvin removed the cord, he could call the transfer record broken. If Rhaelor stopped him by force, the nobles would call it royal interference. If she pulled back, every missing sack would return to her hand. She pressed her palm harder into the stone. Read before he unties the debt and calls it mercy. The pack scale screamed cold through her bones. Palm contact strained. Oath cord active. Debt transfer exposed. Servant theft unstable. Corvin's fingers closed around the cord. Rhaelor moved, then stopped with his hand inches from Corvin's wrist, furious enough to tear the treasurer apart and late enough to know the record still needed to name the mechanism before justice could touch the man. The scale gave one final weighing. The oath cord around Elsin's wrist glowed black, then silver, then black again. Across its twisted threads, names appeared not only hers, but dozens of lower servants, each tied to missing supply that had already passed through noble gates. Elsin had not carried stolen grain in her hands. Her oath cord had been marked to carry the debt after Corvin's rings sealed the relief gates, protected noble reserves, and transferred lower pack hunger onto servant names. The oath cord had named more servants than Elsin, and that made the hall more afraid than if it had named only one. A single accused woman could be buried. Dozens of servant names glowing in the cord around her wrist became a system. Elsin kept her palm pressed to the pack scale, while the black-silver threads burned with names from the lower granary, the feverroot rooms, the moon-silver counting stalls, and the cart yards. Some names belonged to people still alive. Some belonged to servants who had vanished after winter audits. Some belonged to the dead whose families had been told debt survived the body. The court saw them. Still, Elsin was the one bleeding. The scale had not freed her wrist. It had only made the court honest. High Treasurer Corvin Hale stared at the glowing names with the calm of a man calculating which truth to kill first. Then he turned toward the noble benches. Oath cord readings are notoriously unstable when the accused has handled multiple supply ledgers. Elsin's fingers trembled against the stone. Another name for proof? Corvin ignored her. An oath-bound servant may carry resentment into the cord. Names can appear when guilt attempts to spread itself. Rhaelor's eyes narrowed. Those names appeared after your ring signed debt transfers. Because the accused has touched the lower ledgers for years. Her palm is contaminated by proximity. Elsin looked at the king. He liked my proximity when it made me responsible. The crown sank lower. The chains screamed softly. Rhaelor's wolf shadow pressed both forepaws against the wall, thin ribs trembling, but it did not break from shadow. Rhaelor did not touch Corvin. He did not reach for Elsin. He had learned the shape of the trap now. Every violent act from him could be turned into the king's crown, crushing its own audit. His restraint had become necessary. That did not make it gentle. Elsin could feel her wrist pulse beneath the cord. The names were fading at the edges. Corvin was letting them fade. Not by closing the ledger this time. By speaking over them. She leaned closer to the weighing stone. Read why my palm holds the debt record. Corvin's head snapped toward her. Too fast again. The hall had learned to recognize that speed. His voice sharpened. No. Rhaelor turned on him. Why not? Corvin bowed, but the movement lacked its old smoothness. Because identity readings are forbidden in debt trials. The accused stands as servant, not bloodline, not relic, contact, not forbidden witness. Elsin's breath caught. Forbidden witness. She had never heard the phrase spoken in court. But she had heard it whispered once by an old granary keeper who died before spring. Some hands remember where debt was moved. Do not let the scale learn yours. Corvin knew. He had known before the trial. The pack scale hummed under her palm. Elsin felt the cold reach through skin, through muscle, through the years of counting feverroot leaves and hiding broken tablets with shaking hands. The scale was not choosing her. It was using the exact place the kingdom had forced into contact with its records. She whispered, "Read why my palm holds the debt record." The pack scale answered. Black moonlight rose in a narrow column around her hand. The silver chain stopped trembling. The hall grew so quiet that the burn of the oath cord sounded loud in her ears. 4 lines opened across the beam. Granary contact entered. Broken tablets retained. Debt movement witnessed. Scale witness identified. Corvin closed his ledger. The sound was soft. The effect was not. The black moonlight flickered, and the names on Elsin's oath cord began to dim. Rhaelor read the last line. Scale witness identified. Corvin lifted his chin. A forbidden category. Elsin looked at him. You knew before you brought me here. I knew you hid tablets. You knew why. I knew a servant who hides royal records is dangerous. No, Elsin said. A servant who can weigh them is dangerous. The scale groaned, and another line burned beneath the others. Debt scale witness. Bind under theft charge. The lower pack envoys did not rise. The nobles did not shout. No one moved, because movement would mean choosing a side before power showed them which side would survive. Rhaelor's face had gone cold in a different way now. You charged her because the scale needed her palm. Corvin's eyes flashed. I charged her because she stole records. Elsin said, I stole back numbers that had already been stolen from mouths. Corvin stepped toward her wrist again. If she is a forbidden witness, her oath cord must be removed before the reading corrupts royal debt. Elsin understood the next trap before he touched her. If Corvin cut the cord, he would say he saved the court from forbidden contact. If Rhaelor stopped him, the treasurer would call it royal fear. If she let him remove it, every name would sink back into the ledger. Rhaelor moved, then stopped. Elsin saw the fury in him, and beneath it something harder, shame learning patience. She turned her palm until the cut in her wrist pressed against the cord. Pain burst white behind her eyes. Read before he removes the witness and calls it law. The pack scale screamed. Palm contact active. Witness binding exposed. Theft charge prepared. Servant silencing required. Corvin's hand froze above the cord. Rhaelor stared at the fourth line. Servant silencing required. Elsin's knees almost buckled, but she stayed upright by the scale because falling would give Corvin the collapse he needed. The silver beam opened one final image. Corvin in the counting room months before the trial, holding the 3 broken tablets Elsin had hidden, then ordering her theft charge drafted beside the words debt scale witness. Elsin had not been pressed to the pack scale because she stole grain, medicine, or moon silver. Corvin had accused her because her palm could weigh the debt he needed the kingdom to keep calling servant theft. The theft charge lost its clean shape, but Elsin did not gain freedom with it. That was the cruelty of a court trained by ledgers. Even when the accusation cracked, the accused remained useful until someone powerful enough decided the crack mattered more than order. Elsin's palm stayed on the pack scale. The oath cord burned around her wrist, now lit from within by the names it had been forced to carry. Debt scale witness glowed across the silver beam above her, like a sentence older than her life. It did not crown her. It did not save her. It only explained why Corvin had needed her condemned, before the scale could learn what her hand remembered. High Treasurer Corvin Hale shut his white wolf-hide ledger against his chest and faced the hall. "Now you see the danger," he said. "Not guilt. Danger." He was clever enough to turn exposure into warning. "A debt? Scale witness is not a lawful servant contact," Corvin continued. "It is a forbidden category because such witnesses can pull debt out of its assigned holder. They make crowns appear guilty. They make noble obligation bleed into common hands. They make every shortage sound like theft." Elsin looked at him through the cold haze of pain. "No, you made theft sound like shortage." His mouth tightened. Rhaelor stood near the scale, black moonlight touching his armor, his crown still sunk low on the debt plate. His wolf shadow had grown quieter on the wall, not healed, not full, but watching with a terrible attention. Corvin turned to him. "Majesty, if you validate this witness, every royal debt trial judged under your reign can be reopened." Rhaelor's gaze did not leave Elsin's bleeding wrist. "Good." The word moved through the court like a blade drawn slowly enough for everyone to see the edge. Several nobles stiffened. Corvin's expression hardened. "A kingdom cannot survive if every servant may claim hidden debt." Elsin answered before Rhaelor could. "A kingdom cannot survive if every noble may hide it." The pack scale hummed. The sound crawled through her palm, through bone. Through every year she had counted sacks, no one believed she understood. She nearly swayed, but she kept herself upright. If she fell now, Corvin would call the contact unstable. If Rhaelor caught her, they would call the reading royal contaminated. Every path still asked her body to remain useful. Rhaelor saw it. His jaw locked. "What does the scale need?" he asked. Elsin did not look at him. "Not pity. No. Not rescue before it finishes. No." She swallowed against the cold in her throat. "It needs to read why witnesses like me were forbidden." Corvin moved instantly. "No." The court heard the speed of it. So did the scale. Elsin pressed her palm harder into the stone. "Read why debt, scale witnesses were bound under theft charges." The pack scale answered with a deep groan. Black moonlight rose from the crown and threaded through the oath cord, but this time the lines did not run toward storehouses or noble gates. They ran backward into old law. Brittle scrolls, sealed treasury chambers, gray cords hanging in rows, servant names written beside debts larger than bodies could bear. 4 lines burned across the silver beam. Witness palms entered. Royal audits feared. Servant theft law widened. Debt transfer protected. A sound moved through the lower pack envoys. "Not rebellion. Recognition." Corvin spoke over it. "Old law is not old guilt. The treasury widened servant liability because supply systems grew complex." Elsin's voice was quiet. Supply systems grew hungry. Rhaelor read the second line again. Royal audits feared. The crown sank lower. This time the plate did not scream. It settled, as if the metal had accepted that the weight belonged there. Rhaelor looked at Corvin. You did not fear servant theft. You feared servant witnesses. Corvin's fingers tightened around the ledger. I feared collapse. A crown cannot be dragged into every poor man's debt and remain crown. Elsin turned her head toward the sinking circlet. Then perhaps it was not standing as high as you told him. The hall went still. Rhaelor looked at her, not as a servant speaking above station, as the only person in the room who had said aloud what the scale had been saying with weight. Corvin opened the ledger again, pages fluttering as if startled. The witness must be removed from contact. Her palm is now identified as forbidden. The reading is void from this point. He stepped toward her wrist with one ringed hand. Rhaelor moved, then stopped. Elsin saw the war in him. Command against understanding, fury against proof, instinct against the trap. If he struck Corvin now, the treasurer would claim the king feared witness law. If Elsin pulled away, every line would fold back into the ledger, and her theft charge would rise clean again. She spoke before either man could ruin the record. Read before he names my hand illegal. The pack scale flashed. Palm witness active. Forbidden label applied. Theft charge restored if removed. Crown audit incomplete. Rhaelor's face changed at the last line. Incomplete. Not finished. Corvin saw it too. For the first time, his calm faltered into something raw. Majesty, he said, if you allow the crown audit to continue, the scale may weigh debts attached to your bloodline. Rhaelor looked at the crown sinking beneath black moonlight, then at Elsin's palm, still bleeding against the stone because his court had put it there. My bloodline has been living above debts her hand was forced to carry, he said. Let it weigh. The pack scale gave one final sound, lower than thunder, colder than moonlit iron. The crown dropped another inch, and beneath it appeared not grain, not feverroot, not moon silver, but a sealed black ledger marked with the Caerwyn wolf crest. The witness law had not been written to protect the kingdom from false servant claims. It had been written to protect royal debt from hands like Elsin's, because a debt scale witness could weigh what the crown owed before the crown learned how to hide it. The black ledger beneath the crown did not open like a book. It bled weight. Black moonlight seeped from its sealed edges and pulled the crown lower until the silver chains above the debt plate bent in a long, painful arc. The Caerwyn wolf crest on the cover glowed once, then darkened, as if even the royal mark did not want to be seen beneath the pack scale. Elsin's palm burned so cold she could no longer feel the shape of her own fingers. The oath cord around her wrist pulsed with servant names. The scale had not chosen her. It had not saved her. It had found the hand the court had forced into contact and kept weighing through it because the record still needed a body low enough to be doubted. Corvin Hale stared at the black ledger with true anger now. Not fear. Anger. Fear admitted danger. Anger still believed power had been insulted. He lifted his white wolf-hide ledger against his chest. Royal bloodline ledgers are sealed beyond servant audit. Elsin almost laughed, but the sound would have cost too much breath. Everything is beyond servant audit until a servant is blamed for it. Rhaelor stood beside the debt plate, his face carved from shadow and moonlight. His wolf shadow, thin-ribbed and restless on the wall, stared at the black ledger beneath the crown as if it had finally found the hunger inside its own bones. Corvin turned to the court. This is no longer a supply reading. This is an attack on crown inheritance. Bloodline debt cannot be tried through an oath-bound servant's palm. The nobles seized on the phrase, bloodline debt. It sounded forbidden enough to protect them. Elsin lowered her eyes to the stone beneath her hand. Read what the crown inherited. Corvin's voice snapped. No. Rhaelor did not look at him. Let it weigh. The pack scale answered with a sound deep enough to stir dust from the rafters. The black ledger opened 1 inch. Inside was not paper. It was moonlight folded into ledgers, old relief orders, unpaid lower pack labor tallies, servant debt transfers, noble exemptions, royal feasts marked as morale provisions, medicine shortages labeled natural strain. Each page carried the Caerwyn crest beside marks from treasurers long dead and councils still alive through descendants sitting in the hall. 4 lines burned across the silver beam. Crown ledger entered. Lower labor unpaid. Servant debt inherited. Royal blood sustained. Rhaelor did not move. Elsin saw the line strike him anyway. Royal blood sustained. The crown on the plate sank until half its silver teeth disappeared into black moonlight. Corvin spoke quickly. Every monarchy is sustained by labor. That is not theft, it is fealty. Elsin said, fealty is not hunger assigned after the work is taken. The lower packs owe service to the crown, and the crown owes life to the packs. The hall quieted around that. Rhaelor looked at her then, not with softness, with the terrible stillness of a man hearing his own title weighed by someone it had nearly destroyed. My blood was sustained by debt shifted onto them, he said. Corvin bowed his head. Your Majesty's blood sustained the realm. Rhaelor's voice hardened. My blood was fed while theirs was recorded as owing. The pack scale groaned. The black ledger opened wider, and the hall filled with a vision of old winter courts, lower pack workers hauling grain under moonlight, servants counting feverroot until dawn, cart hands mending roads, healers trading family silver for medicine already owed to them. Above each service, the ledger wrote, debt remained. Beneath each noble exemption, it wrote, crown stability. Elsin's wrist trembled. The names in the oath cord flared. Some of those debts were older than she was. Older than Rhaelor. Older than Corvin's rings. That made them worse, not cleaner. Time had not purified the crime. It had taught it to sound traditional. Corvin stepped toward the scale. Inherited debt cannot be judged as current guilt. Elsin turned her face toward him. But current hunger can be charged to old servants? His mouth thinned. Rhaelor's wolf shadow pressed its forehead to the wall. For the first time, the beast made a sound. Low. Starved. Ashamed. Not bowing. Not submitting. Recognizing. Rhaelor closed his eyes for one breath, then opened them and looked at the crown. What closes the ledger? Corvin answered before the scale could. Royal seal and council review. Elsin's palm spasmed against the stone. The pack scale flashed. False closure offered. Council review delays. Witness contact required. Living crown must answer. The words froze the room. Rhaelor looked at Elsin's hand. She understood the next trap before anyone named it. The scale needed her contact because her palm had carried the supply records. It needed the living crown because the old ledger had hidden debt beneath royal inheritance. If Rhaelor placed his crown over her hand, the court would say he had consumed the witness. If she carried it alone, the crown would let her body hold debts it had created. Neither could close the record by swallowing the other. Corvin understood too. That was why he smiled again. A small, bloodless smile. The scale demands impossibility, he said. A servant palm cannot stand beside a living crown. One must weigh over the other. Elsin lifted her face, pale with pain. Then that is how the debt survived. The silver beam shuddered. Rhaelor looked from her palm to his crown, half sunk in black moonlight. His voice came quiet, stripped of throne and ceremony. Not over. Elsin's breath caught. He did not reach for her. He did not touch her wrist. He only removed the royal signet from his hand and set it on the stone beside the plate, near enough for the scale to feel his living authority, far enough not to cover her contact. Corvin lunged toward the black ledger. The pack scale screamed. Ledger closure attempted. Witness contact active. Living crown incomplete. Debt repayment unnamed. The black ledger opened fully beneath the sinking crown, revealing one final line written in old Caerwyn silver. The crown could not rise until the living Alpha King named the lower pack debt as royal debt before the servant witness whose palm had been forced to carry it. The black ledger lay open beneath the sinking crown, and every person in the Moon Treasury Hall waited to see whether a king could speak debt without turning it into mercy. Rhaelor Caerwyn's signet rested beside the pack scale, gold-white against the black moonlight. Elsin's palm remained on the weighing stone, blood darkening the oath cord around her wrist. The scale had demanded both contacts, but it had not joined them. That mattered. Her hand was not beneath his seal. His authority was not covering her witness. They stood beside each other before the same debt, and the court had no old rule clean enough to hide behind. Corvin Hale lunged for the black ledger again. Rhaelor did not strike him. Not yet. Instead, the Alpha King turned toward the hall, toward the noble benches, the lower pack envoys, the silent servants near the pillars, and the crown half buried in weight. The lower pack debt is royal debt, he said. The pack scale rang once. The sound moved through the floor like ice breaking under a river. Corvin's face went white with fury. Majesty, careful. Rhaelor looked at him. Careful is how this ledger survived. The crown sank one last inch, then stopped. Elsin felt the halt through her palm. Not release, not comfort. Recognition. The kind that came too late to undo damage, but early enough to keep the next lie from standing. Rhaelor continued, each word measured, not soft, not performative. The grain withheld from lower villages is crown debt. The feverroot sealed behind noble gates is crown debt. The moon silver recast into treasury rings is crown debt. The deaths renamed as winter shortage are crown debt. The servant oaths marked to carry what the crown owed are crown debt. The black ledger shuddered beneath the scale. Across the hall, noble seals began appearing in the black moonlight, one by one. Estate gates, cellar locks, wax marks, delayed relief orders, names of houses that had fed on shortage while calling it survival. No one rose. No hungry crowd stormed the benches. That would have been easier for the nobles to condemn. The silence was worse because it stayed lawful. Elsin's wrist shook, and the pack scale flashed another line. Debt named. Repayment unassigned. Witness contact strained. Oath cord still active. Rhaelor read the last line, and his expression hardened. The cord, he said. Corvin lifted his chin. If the servant oath is removed before repayment assignment, the record collapses. If it remains, the witness bears the weight. That is how debt law works. Elsin looked at him. That is how your debt law works. The words cost her. Her arm had begun to go numb. Her palm was no longer only cold. It felt hollow, as if the scale had carved a place inside her hand for every root, tablet, and dead name it had read. Rhaelor turned to her. What does it need? Elsin swallowed. Not removal by pity. No. Not your seal over my hand. No. She looked at the glowing oath cord. It needs the debt moved off servant names before the cord comes loose. The pack scale hummed. Rhaelor faced the hall again. Every debt transferred from royal ledger to servant oath is void. Every lower pack supply charge marked against granary hands is reopened. Every noble estate holding grain, feverroot, or moon silver under emergency reserve will surrender it to crown audit before moonrise. Corvin laughed once. It was a dry, sharp sound. You will empty your noble houses to feed packs that cannot repay you. Rhaelor's wolf shadow lifted its head on the wall, thin ribs still visible, but its eyes burned brighter now. Rhaelor said, They already paid. The scale struck the hall with another note. The oath cord around Elsin's wrist loosened by a single thread. Only one. Enough to make her breathe. Corvin saw it and snapped the white wolf-hide ledger open. Noble reserve cannot be seized under servant witness alone. Elsin lifted her bleeding hand slightly but kept her palm on the stone. Then weigh the reserves. The pack scale answered before Corvin could close the ledger. Silver-black lines shot from the noble seals to the debt plate. Grain stores appeared in miniature under the scale's light. Feverroot crates. Moon silver boxes. Locked cellars. Hidden medicine rooms. Each one tipped toward the crown until the circlet began rising, not because the debt vanished, but because the hoarded weight was finally being moved where it belonged. 4 final lines burned across the beam. Royal debt named. Noble stores entered. Servant oath released. Debt scale witness restored. The oath cord fell from Elsin's wrist. It did not break dramatically. It simply dropped, a dead thread with no more authority. Elsin nearly collapsed when the weight left her. Rhaelor moved one step, then stopped before touching her. He had learned. May I stand near? He asked. The hall heard it. So did she. Elsin looked at the man whose crown had nearly buried her under debt he had not created alone, but had still allowed to weigh her first. Yes, she said, near. Not over. He came beside her, not in front. Corvin tried to step back into the cluster of nobles, but the black moonlight had already marked his rings, ledger, and seal. Guards moved only when Rhaelor raised one hand. High Treasurer Corvin Hale is stripped of office, Rhaelor said. His ledgers, rings, estate contracts, death tablets, and relief orders are seized for full weighing. No servant will carry crown shortage under oath cord again. Corvin's eyes burned at Elsin. A granary servant cannot rebalance a kingdom. Elsin lifted her hand from the stone at last. Her palm was pale, marked with silver lines that faded slowly, like roots returning to skin. No, she said, but she can show where the weight was hidden. The pack scale settled. The crown rose fully from the black moonlight, stained but no longer sinking. It did not look lighter. It looked accused. Rhaelor did not put it on. Instead, he held it in both hands and turned to Elsin before the court. "You were brought here as thief," he said. "You leave as Elsin Brack, debt, scale witness of Caerwyn, living proof that hunger was moved before it was blamed." Elsin looked at the lower pack envoys, the servants by the pillars, the nobles who could no longer hide behind clean wax, and the king standing beside rather than above her. The ache in her wrist remained. So did the memory of the cold stone. Recognition did not erase what had been done, but it changed what could be done next. She stepped down from the weighing dais on her own feet, no crown above her, no hidden blood revealed, no scale choosing her as anything more than the witness Corvin had tried to bury. Rhaelor walked beside her at a careful distance, close enough to face the hall, far enough not to claim her survival as his gift. Behind them, the pack scale stood silent, its plates even for the first time all night. And for the first time in Caerwyn, hunger did not kneel under a servant's name.